Peoples, and he said, go ahead, anything you want to do with it. And so I started writing and fooling with things and changing things, and all of a sudden I realized I was wrecking it. So I called him up and I said, forget what I said about that. I said, I'm just going to shoot it the way it is. The more I tamper with it, I'm killing it with improvements, so.
Clint Eastwood has spent more than 7 decades shaping American cinema. From the lone gunman myths of the good, the bad, and the ugly to the quiet moral reckonings of Unforgiven and $1 Million Baby, he's remained Hollywood's most stoic storyteller.
If you have a good screenplay, you're 50% there, and if you cast it well, you're at 40% on top of that, and there's 10% of which you can screw it up.
So when at 91 he was asked to name his favorite films, fans expected another list of dusty westerns or box office champions. Instead, Eastwood surprised everyone. He chose stories about music, war, family, guilt, and redemption. 6, he directed himself, and one timeless classic he's cherished since his early days as an actor.
And he comes in under budget every single time. And the greatest influence he's had over me is that's something that I strive to do, but I've never been able to do it as well as he has.
Each film exposes a different side of the man behind the squint. The jazz lover, the philosopher, the craftsman who believes art should feel honest rather than perfect. Tonight we count down from number 7 to number 1, the movies Clint Eastwood himself singled out as his personal favorites.
Finally, one day I started thinking, I had to try this myself.
What do these titles say about the director who's spent a lifetime exploring morality and consequence? Stick around to find out and see why his number 1 pick isn't a Western at all, but a dark Hollywood satire that still haunts him. Number 7, Bird, 1988. Clint Eastwood's countdown begins not with gunfire or dusty trails, but with a saxophone wail cutting through cigarette smoke. Bird, released in 1988, is his elegy to jazz legend Charlie "Bird" Parker, a man whose musical brilliance soared to impossible heights even as addiction pulled him toward ruin. Eastwood constructs the film like an extended jam session. Moments overlap, memories riff on one another, and time itself bends around the melody of a man chasing perfection he can never hold.
You know, critics are just like anybody else. They have their opinion, and you hope it's very flattering to your ego if they happen to say, well, fine, I really think this guy did a marvelous job. And you see it in print, and it pumps you up for a second. But the main thing is, how does the public accept it?
Eastwood has loved jazz since he was a boy listening to late-night radio in Northern California. When he read the script about Parker, he felt an almost moral duty to tell the story honestly. It was a nice story about someone whose musicianship I admired so greatly, he told CBS News. It was a good script on the analysis of the self-destructiveness of personality, people who insist on sinking into the abyss. Success, being idolized by other musicians, none of it was enough. That fascination with self-destruction runs through much of Eastwood's own work, from Unforgiven to Mystic River, but Bird gave it a musical heartbeat. Forrest Whitaker's performance as Parker remains hypnotic. He doesn't merely imitate, he channels the man's restless energy.
And it was difficult to edit because it's like chapters that...
The mix of ecstasy and torment that defines genius. His portrayal earned him the Best Actor award at the 1988 Cannes Film Festival and a Golden Globe nomination. Eastwood himself won the Golden Globe for Best Director, and the film took home the Oscar for Best Sound. Critics called it one of the most heartfelt films ever made by a director better known for silence than melody. Visually, Bird feels almost like a memory etched in cigarette smoke. Cinematographer Jack N. Green bathes Parker's world in blues, ambers, and deep shadow, evoking the claustrophobic intimacy of jam sessions where emotion matters more than dialogue.
I feel very blessed tonight. This is very special to me. I feel very fortunate that I had this opportunity to work with such individuals who cared about their work in such a great degree. A visionary director like Clint Eastwood who brought this thing to the screen, and great cinematographer Jack Green, Liddy Niehaus who did the music.
Eastwood insisted that the soundtrack use Parker's own recordings. digitally remastered so that each solo felt like Parker was playing live in the room. The editing, rhythmic and unpredictable, mirrors jazz itself, sometimes racing, sometimes pausing long enough for pain to echo.
So there's a lot of hand language going on back and forth, which he was much better at because he's Italian and I'm not.
Despite modest box office numbers, Bird became a turning point in Eastwood's career. It showed that the man once typecast as the man with no name could step entirely outside genre expectations and craft something lyrical, deeply human, and musically alive. Jazz, Eastwood once said, is the most honest music. You can't fake it, neither could he. Bird was his attempt to film honesty itself, to capture that fragile space between brilliance and collapse.
Save that.
Well, I think it's always wonderful when you know somebody's out there got your back and it's going to tell you the truth, you know. And my mother did it for me, so I was able to do it for her also, which, you know, was good. I mean, we had a really good working relationship.
Sure.
Do you think a filmmaker known for Western grit can truly capture the soul of a jazz genius? When you watch Bird, do you sense Eastwood's empathy for Parker's pain? Or does the chaos of the music take over completely? Number 6, Letters from Iwo Jima, 2006. Clint Eastwood's career has always balanced myth and humanity. With Letters from Iwo Jima, he did something few American directors had ever dared. He told a World War II story entirely from the enemy's perspective. Released in 2006 as the companion piece to Flags of Our Fathers, this haunting film shifts the camera across the Pacific to the same volcanic island, but through Japanese eyes. The story follows General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, played by Ken Watanabe, and a humble baker turned conscript, Saigo, portrayed by Kazunari Ninomiya. Together, they dig into the black sand of Iwo Jima, preparing for a battle they know they cannot win. They write letters home to wives and children they will never see again. Through their words, Eastwood captures the quiet dignity of men stripped of propaganda and reduced to what they truly are: human beings terrified, loyal, and longing for peace.
Safe to say, right?
Yeah.
Did you do them both together at the same time?
No, we did one, and then while I was waiting for visual effects to be made for Flags, we went off and made Letters from Iwo Jima. But the inspiration to do that one came out of researching the first one, and we started wondering what kind of people.
Eastwood later said this film was one of his proudest achievements. It shows what it was like for them, he explained. They had to go to the island and were told not to plan on coming back. But they still had hope that they could go back home someday, like any soldier from any country.
It was miserable for the Americans. Imagine how it was miserable for the other guys that didn't have the same equipment, the same access to food and water and everything. So they were an interesting group of people.
That empathy is what makes Letters from Iwo Jima so rare. Eastwood, a veteran himself, understood that heroism and tragedy look the same in any language. Shot almost entirely in muted tones of ash, gray, and sepia, the film feels like it's unfolding inside memory itself.
I think when you read one of the scripts that Clint's going to do, you can look at it and say, what is he thinking? You know, and then it comes across my desk and it's like, wow, I never envisioned it that way.
The cinematography by Tom Stern mirrors the volcanic dust, gritty, colorless, timeless. Eastwood filmed it largely in Japanese, relying on translators on set, but insisted that the emotional truth transcended language. The haunting score, minimal piano chords, and distant echoes of battle emphasizes loneliness more than violence. Critics immediately recognized Letters from Iwo Jima as something extraordinary. It earned 4 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture and Best Director, and 1 for Best Sound Editing. Many historians noted that no major Hollywood film had so compassionately portrayed Japan's wartime experience. Together with Flags of Our Fathers, it forms a cinematic yin and yang, 2 sides of the same heartbreak.
It's very hectic and it's combat, and that's the reality of combat, and Clint really wanted to nail that aspect of just, you know, almost organized chaos, really, is what war is.
More than a war story, it's a meditation on futility, honor, and the thin thread of humanity that connects supposed enemies. Eastwood once said he made letters to remind audiences that every flag has a story, and that war, however necessary or justified, always leaves the same silence behind. How do you feel when a war film asks you to empathize with the so-called other side? Does Letters from Iwo Jima change how you view heroism? Or does it simply reveal that in war, everyone loses something sacred? Number 5. $1 Million Baby, 2004. When $1 Million Baby arrived in 2004, few expected Clint Eastwood, then in his 70s, to deliver one of the most emotionally devastating films of his career. The story of a lonely boxing trainer and a waitress who dreams of becoming a champion became more than a sports drama.
Used that power to do the kinds of movies that he wants to do. $1 Million Baby, it's just, that's not the kind of movie that a studio would make.
It was a meditation on faith, family, and final choices. Eastwood plays Frankie Dunn, a veteran trainer haunted by loss and estranged from his daughter. When Hilary Swank's Maggie Fitzgerald walks into his gym, the two souls, both wounded and stubborn, forge an unlikely bond. Maggie rises through the ranks with Frankie in her corner, but a tragic accident in the ring leaves her paralyzed from the neck down.
Aim for the bullseye, but you don't always hit it. So it's a nice thing when it works out.
The film then shifts from victory to the impossible question of mercy and dignity. What does it mean to love someone enough to let them go? For Eastwood, this was never a boxing movie. He told CBS News that he saw it as a story about two people who have no family, who are very reticent. It's about a father and daughter finding each other and then facing a terrible moral decision. That duality, love as both salvation and burden, is what makes the film so haunting. Even the title is a kind of bitter joke. Maggie's $1 million dream costs everything.
And he knows when he got it. He didn't sit around doing it 4 or 5 times. And so that kind of energy, it's almost, I hate to use this term because Clint will get pissed off at me. It's not that's unpolished.
Cinematographer Tom Stern shot the film in a shadow-heavy palette, bathed in greens and grays that evoke the dim light of a boxing gym and the loneliness of old age. Eastwood's direction is as precise as a fighter's jab. Every cut lands with purpose. He also composed the film's score himself, a minimal piano theme that lingers like a confession you can't take back. When the movie was released, it stunned audiences and critics alike. At the 77th Academy Awards, it won Best Picture, Best Director for Eastwood, Best Actress for Swank, and Best Supporting Actor for Morgan Freeman. Eastwood became the oldest person ever to win the directing Oscar at that time, but he treated the film's success with typical humility, saying, "I just wanted to make a small story about two people who care about each other." What makes $1 Million Baby endure is its brutal honesty. It doesn't offer clear answers about morality or faith. Instead, it forces us to ask our own questions. What would you do for someone you love when there's no right choice? Where does dignity end and despair begin? Eastwood's camera lingers on faces long after dialogue ends, as if to say that real love exists in the silences.
To me is the fact that it wasn't really, I like boxing stories, but it wasn't really a boxing story. It was a love story and a person who he was somewhat distressed about his relationship with his daughter, which was non-existent, and then he all of a sudden how he finds this sort of surrogate daughter.
Even now, Eastwood considers Maggie Fitzgerald's story one of his most personal films, a testament to quiet grace in a world that glorifies victory. There are no winners here, only human beings fighting for meaning in the final round. If someone you loved begged for mercy the way Maggie does, could you grant it? Or is love the strength to make them keep fighting when they no longer can? Number 4, Mystic River, 2003. With Mystic River, Clint Eastwood stepped into the shadows of a modern tragedy. One not set in the Old West or on a battlefield, but in the quiet streets of Boston, where the past never really dies. Released in 2003, this adaptation of Dennis Lehane's novel examines 3 childhood friends bound by a single act of violence and a lifetime of guilt. It's a film about fate, revenge, and how pain ripples through generations like water spreading across a dark river. The story centers on Jimmy Markham, Sean Penn, a father and ex-con whose teenage daughter is murdered, Sean Devine, Kevin Bacon, a police detective investigating the case, and Dave Boyle, Tim Robbins, a man still haunted by childhood trauma after being abducted years earlier. As suspicion grows, tragedy begins to echo itself, and the line between justice and vengeance collapses. Eastwood said what drew him to the story was its inevitability, its sense that some destinies are written long before we recognize them. It deals with fate giving people a bad hand that keeps getting worse, he told CBS News. No amount of sane advice can stop the tragedy. That fatalism is pure Eastwood. A belief that human beings, however moral or strong, remain at the mercy of forces larger than themselves. Memory, guilt, and the ghosts of what they've done. The director's restraint is masterful. There are no stylized gunfights, no big speeches, just heavy silence, like the weight of truth pressing down on every frame. Cinematographer Tom Stern drenches the film in desaturated browns and grays, evoking a city drained of hope. The score, composed by Eastwood himself, is sparse and mournful, drifting between piano and low strings like a confession whispered too late.
Well, it's hard to set up just one scene out of the film, but this is two really wonderful young actors. They're young to me anyway. They're men in their 40s, but and I had the pleasure of being behind the camera in this particular.
Sean Penn delivers one of his most intense performances, balancing rage with heartbreak. His scream, discovering his daughter's body behind police tape, is one of the most harrowing moments in modern cinema. Tim Robbins' portrayal of Dave, a man crushed by lifelong trauma, earned him the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. Penn won for Best Actor, and Eastwood's direction was nominated for both the Academy Award and Golden Globe. Critics called the film a Greek tragedy in flannel shirts, and they weren't wrong. Yet, for all its darkness, Mystic River also shows Eastwood's compassion. It's not a film about villains, but victims of fate. Everyone in this story is trying in their own flawed way to make sense of pain, and that's what makes it universal. Question for you: do you believe tragedy is inevitable, that some lives are simply doomed to repeat pain? Or do you think there's always a way to break free from the past? Number 3. The Outlaw Josie Wales, 1976. Long before he was the elder statesman of American cinema, Clint Eastwood was its outlaw philosopher. In The Outlaw Josie Wales, 1976, he crafted one of the most profound westerns of its era, a story not of revenge alone, but of redemption, community, and forgiveness in a world scarred by war. It's the movie that transformed Eastwood from a Western icon into a true storyteller.
But he was bold. He was extremely bold. He was never afraid to try anything new. It was a great adventure when it happened, and when it kind of clicked, it was naturally a great adventure for me because it led on to other things.
Set in the aftermath of the Civil War, the film follows Josie Wales, a Missouri farmer whose wife and son are murdered by Union marauders. Consumed by grief, he joins a band of Confederate guerrillas and becomes a killer, only to see his comrades slaughtered after surrendering. Branded an outlaw, Josie flees into the wild, hunted by bounty hunters and soldiers. But along his journey, something remarkable happens. The killer learns to live again. As Josie wanders through the ruins of the post-war South, he begins to gather a surrogate family, a Cherokee elder named Lone Waddy, a young Navajo woman, and a widowed settler named Sarah Turner with her granddaughter. Together, they form a fragile community bound by survival and kindness. For Eastwood, this transformation, from vengeance to belonging, was the film's heart.
You were down in the
I was
audience?
down in the audience. I didn't have to worry because I didn't have a thing to do till the very end of the show, which was to present Best Picture.
Right.
And Howard Koch, who's normally a very cool, collected type person, comes up to me and his hands were going up and down like a Singer sewing machine. And he says, Charlton Heston hasn't shown up. Well, I didn't know he was supposed to be on the show, so I said, yeah, so.
Big deal, huh?
Yeah, and so he said, he has to read the whole opening thing. He says, can you come back and do it?
He's a man who has become a cynic because of the war, Eastwood told CBS News, and then slowly rejuvenates, building a surrogate family. That emotional renewal mirrored Eastwood's own evolution as a filmmaker. Having spent years playing solitary gunslingers under directors like Sergio Leone and Don Siegel, he used Josie Wales to challenge the myth of the lone hero. His camera lingers not on shootouts, but on human gestures. A smile shared around a campfire, a quiet moment of trust. A man who learns that peace can be stronger than revenge. Shot across the dusty plains of Arizona and Utah, the film's landscapes feel biblical, vast, punishing, yet strangely forgiving. Eastwood's direction is lean and instinctive. There's poetry in his pauses, beauty in restraint. The score by Jerry Fielding mixes mournful violins with soft harmonica, creating a tone of elegy rather than triumph. Audiences embraced it instantly. The film became one of the biggest Western hits of the 1970s, and was later selected for preservation in the U.S. National Film Registry as culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Critics hailed it as the rare Western, where the gunfighter's journey leads inward, toward peace, not blood. And yet, Josie Wales remains deeply Eastwood. It asks a question that defines his entire career. Can a man who's done terrible things ever find grace? When you watch Josie Wales, do you see him as a hero seeking justice or a broken man seeking forgiveness? And in a world built on vengeance, is redemption ever truly possible? Number 2, Unforgiven, 1992. When Unforgiven hit theaters in 1992, it felt less like a Western and more like an elegy. A slow funeral march for the genre that made Clint Eastwood a legend. The film is the story of William Money, a once notorious killer who's now a widowed pig farmer, struggling to raise his children and live quietly.
It's great, the romanticism that Ford brought, and Hawks, and all of them brought, and the wonderful cattle drives in Red River, and the great Anthony Mann westerns that Jimmy Stewart did. But I don't.
But when two cowboys brutalize a prostitute in a frontier town, Money is pulled back into a world he thought he'd buried forever. It's a classic setup, but Eastwood uses it to dismantle every myth the Western ever sold us about heroism, violence, and redemption. As both star and director, Eastwood approached Unforgiven with the weight of history on his shoulders, his own and Hollywood's. He dedicated the film to his mentors, Sergio Leone and Don Siegel, calling it his final statement on the West.
Don't just do something, stand there. And if you're projecting the right thoughts, then people will reach forward to you, and if you're not, then they're not going to be listening anyway. They're going to dial out.
The movie's dusty, rain-soaked landscapes and muted colors set the tone. This is not the golden frontier of legends. It's a place where the air is heavy with regret, and every gunshot feels like a sin. Money joins his old partner Ned Logan, Morgan Freeman, and a brash young bounty hunter, the Schofield Kid, to claim the reward for killing the two cowboys. But as the killings unfold, the supposed hero's mask slips away. Money isn't righteous, he's haunted. His hands shake when he drinks, his voice cracks when he kills, and his eyes reveal the cost of every bullet he's ever fired.
But I won't get into that. I'll get into this film. Unforgiven was an interesting project in my life because I first purchased the script under the various titles that it had. It was submitted to me under the title of Whore's Gold, The Cut Whore Killings, or The William Money Killings.
When asked about the film's meaning, Eastwood said, "The characters are complex, including the villains with good points. The hero goes against his own instincts." In other words, Unforgiven isn't about a gunfighter saving the day. It's about a man trying and failing to save his soul. The film's climactic scene, Money riding into a storm to avenge his friend, is one of cinema's great reversals. The audience expects justice. What they get is damnation. Money kills everyone in his path, not as a hero, but as a ghost, reclaiming the darkness he tried to leave behind. And when he rides away, there's no victory music, only silence, the kind that stays with you long after the credits roll.
To do this character. And so I put it in a drawer, and then all of a sudden, about 1990, I realized, I've still got this script in the drawer. Maybe I ought to take it out and look at it before I get too old to do it. So I got it out of a drawer, reread it, and fell in love with it all over again. And so in 1991, we proceeded to go up to Alberta.
Unforgiven won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director, cementing Eastwood's place among Hollywood's giants. But beyond the trophies, it closed the book on the myth of the noble gunfighter. The man who once defined the Western had just buried it. Do you see William Money as a hero who earned redemption, or as a man forever cursed by violence? And if even the good guys can't escape their past, what does that say about the price of justice? Number 1. Sunset Boulevard, 1950. Clint Eastwood's favorite film isn't one he made. It isn't even a Western, a war film, or a crime drama. It's Sunset Boulevard, Billy Wilder's 1950 masterpiece about the rot beneath Hollywood glamour.
Is to take Lubitsch to the netherworld. Because he did work with Lubitsch. I think he worked on, I think he may even have worked on Garbo Laughs, Ninochka. And to take that and wed that to his own particular vision.
For a man who built his life inside that very system, Eastwood's love for this dark satire says everything about how he views fame, as both dream and curse. The movie opens with a dead man floating face down in a swimming pool. Through his narration, we learn he's Joe Gillis, William Holden, a struggling screenwriter who becomes entangled with Norma Desmond, Gloria Swanson, a faded silent film star living in a decaying mansion. Norma dreams of a comeback, Joe becomes her captive, emotionally and financially, until he tries to escape, and she shoots him. The story ends with Norma's delusional descent down the staircase, whispering the line that defined Hollywood tragedy. "All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up." Eastwood has called Sunset Boulevard his favorite film of all time. In interviews, he's praised its delicate balance between 2 opposing acting styles, Swanson's operatic theatricality and Holden's grounded realism. "I always liked Billy Wilder," Eastwood said, "and I love the way 2 very different performances could coexist so perfectly." It's a comment that reveals a director's mind at work, someone who appreciates tension not just in story, but in craft. For Eastwood, Wilder's genius lay in restraint. Sunset Boulevard isn't a melodrama, it's a quiet scream. Wilder, himself an immigrant who fled Nazi Germany, knew the absurdity of chasing immortality in Hollywood. Eastwood, who has spent 7 decades navigating stardom, clearly recognizes that truth. The film's theme, Fame is Madness, mirrors Eastwood's lifelong caution about celebrity. He's always been wary of the spotlight, preferring to let his work speak. Norma Desmond's obsession, in contrast, is what happens when art becomes a mirror that never looks away. The film was nominated for 11 Academy Awards and won 3, including Best Screenplay and Best Music. Today, it's regarded as one of cinema's greatest achievements, not just a critique of Hollywood, but a love letter to its ghosts. Wilder populates his story with real silent era icons, blurring the line between fiction and memory, dream and nightmare. Eastwood's admiration makes perfect sense. Like Wilder, he's a craftsman who believes storytelling should reveal human fragility beneath the myth. In Sunset Boulevard, he sees the ultimate cautionary tale, not about fame's rewards, but its cost. Why do you think a filmmaker who spent his life mastering masculinity and myth chooses a film about fragility and illusion as his favorite? Does Sunset Boulevard reflect Eastwood's own quiet fear that even legends fade when the lights go out? As the credits roll on Clint Eastwood's life and career, one truth becomes clear. His favorite films aren't just stories he admires, they're reflections of who he is. From the smoky jazz clubs of Bird to the battlefields of Letters from Iwo Jima, From the heartbreak of $1 Million Baby to the moral weight of Unforgiven, each film reveals something about Eastwood's own search for meaning. He's drawn to stories where strength isn't about victory, but vulnerability, where the hero limps, doubts, and sometimes loses everything except his integrity. Whether it's a boxer who learns compassion in defeat, a gunfighter who can't escape his past, or a forgotten jazz genius chasing redemption through pain, Eastwood sees humanity in its most honest form. Even his choice of Sunset Boulevard as his all-time favorite says something profound. That fame, success, and applause are fleeting, but truth on film lasts forever. Across decades, he's learned from the masters: Billy Wilder's precision, William Wyler's humanity, and John Ford's sense of moral poetry. Those influences echo in every frame he's ever shot. And at 91, Eastwood isn't just reflecting on movies. He's reflecting on a lifetime spent searching for that perfect balance between grace and grit.
The things that go into it. So what makes a good Western is just a really good story. And how well you tell it, of course, is really important. And who plays in it, and if you cast it properly. I'm also a big proponent of casting a film properly, regardless of genre.
In the end, these 7 films tell us that what Clint Eastwood values most isn't power or even justice. It's honesty. The kind of honesty that strips away artifice and looks life straight in the eye. Which of Eastwood's favorite films surprised you the most? And if you could ask him one question about filmmaking, what would it be? Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Because great cinema isn't just about watching stories, it's about joining the conversation they start.